Hello and welcome to the Pod of the Damned. I'm your host Ian. Joining me once again this week, as always, is 1/3 of the team. Nico, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm not bad. You've still not mastered that, but yeah, you're like you could see you were going. I'll make up something on the
I
spot.
hadn't really thought about how I'm gonna do the intros to everyone yet, so that's something I need to maybe go away and think about for the next episode. Because it was when we were doing the Army of the Dead one, and I was like, "Fuck," because obviously I've done podcasts with more than two people before, but I was like, I don't know how to introduce everyone, so maybe I just need to wrap my head around that. But yeah,
It's a
but thank
holy
you,
trinity now.
thank
You're
you
struggling
so much for pointing it out.
for
I'm
pointing
so
out, yeah,
happy.
because I love you that much. That's why.
Is that what it is? Also joining us once again is our other third of the team. See, I fucked it up again. Candy, the final girl. How are you doing?
I am good. How are you?
I am excellent. I really went to take a sip of my coffee at like the most inopportune moment there, so I'm just going to put it back
I
down.
do that every time.
Candy,
Yeah.
I should apologise because I do try and fuck up his intros quite often. By the way, I should have told you that at the start.
Quite often, you do it every week.
I know, it's amazing.
Every week, every episode. And it's not just intros either. It's when I'm trying to do the socials. It's when I'm trying to do the ratings. It's when I'm trying to do fucking hate you, Nico.
I'm like a gremlin.
I shouldn't laugh because I hosted my own show for a long time, and yeah, I know what that feels like. So I'm sorry, but it's also kind of funny.
It's
Yeah,
it's a little funny. I suppose I'll give you that, Nico.
it
Dick.
brightens my day every time. The outro one's the best one because sometimes I just throw it in and do it as well,
Oh
and
yeah,
you see him like
when you
anticipate
decide
it.
that you're gonna join in with me with the outro catchphrase, and then you throw it. Oh.
That's the one
Anyways,
that annoys him the most. I love doing
anyways,
that.
we are a horror podcast that deep dives into a different topic every single week in our quest to create a leaderboard of the best and worst horror movies of all time. Today we are talking all about Misery. We will get into all aspects of the movie, and I'm sure many other things in just a couple of moments. Before we do that, if you would like to follow us on our social media platforms, you can do so. We're on X at Damn Podcast, Facebook and Instagram is Pod of the Damned. You can email us at podofthedamned@gmail.com, and you can subscribe to us on Patreon, patreon.com/Pod of the Damned. See what happens, Nico, when you don't fucking interrupt and just get it right.
I don't even need to interrupt sometimes, I just need to give him a look. Like one time Sheena did it for me. It was just the arse on camera and he just broke.
I did, yeah, I remember
So
that.
yeah.
It was a really
That,
up
I,
close and personal, cat
I,
asshole. I didn't really know what
I
to
didn't
do.
expect her to do it. She just came over and then I'm like, oh, I just realised what she's doing.
Yeah, I didn't really know what to do with that image, and it definitely threw me off track for a couple of moments. But we're professionals on this show.
Oh yeah.
But
Cut
yeah,
arseholes and try to fuck each other up. Nothing wrong with it.
absolutely. But yes, we are talking all about Misery. This is my choice of movie this week. As I stated in the last episode, this is the final movie that we're going to be covering before we go into our new rotation of movies. So stay tuned to those social media platforms because we will be announcing what movies are going to be coming up in the course of the next couple of days. And of course, as always, we'll be asking you guys, our followers and listeners, to give us your scores and reviews on them all, as well as many other things. Obviously, if you've followed us on social media for a while, you'll have noticed that Candy's also taking part in posting quite a lot of things, especially on our Twitter account, or X account, sorry, should I say. So hopefully you guys will like the new dynamic that we've got going on there as well. So please do go interact with all those things. You can email us your thoughts, you can send us DMs, you can do whatever you like. But please go and do that and follow those accounts. I chose Misery. I was trying to think. Right, we went sort of. I feel like we've gone through a period lately, Nico. Maybe just before Christmas, where we we'd done quite a few like of the big blockbuster movies that we'd kind of let fall through the cracks because we did Jaws, we did The Thing, and part of me kind of wants to like keep that little bit of a trend going by picking like some of the more popular horror movies, which obviously is good. It's always good to talk about the really shitty ones like last week when we talked about Army of the Dead. But we like to talk about what I think is one of the great ones as well. So that's why I chose Misery. Before we get into it, as always, we will do our predictions. Nico, Misery, where do you think it's going to come on the leaderboard?
I think it'll be top end, but not top 10. I think it'll just be outside it.
Okay, so what do you think? Maybe like 15th, something in that
Yeah,
sort of
something like
ballpark?
that. Yeah, roundabout.
Okay. Candy?
I know how specific those little half points and stuff can get. So I'm going to say 20-ish.
Okay. So the movies in that sort of 15 to 20 range at the minute, you've got Hereditary, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Descent, Prey, Zombieland, Black Phone. Those are the sort of movies that are in there just now.
My favourite out of them is Black Phone.
Really?
Yeah,
That's interesting.
because I
This
watched it
one's
again
really
recently.
good, but yeah.
I think they're all good movies, and obviously they are because they're that high up in our leaderboard. So it'll be interesting to see where Misery comes. Like I say, there's been a lot of movement up at near the top end of our leaderboard lately, anyway. And you're right, Candy. The difference. So our ninth place movie is an 8.3, and our 23rd place movie is a 7.9. So like especially at that end of the leaderboard,
The point.
I think the more and more you go down the leaderboard, the slightly less it matters because the gaps become a little bit bigger. But especially at that top end of the leaderboard, like in that sort of fifth all the way down, there's fifth to 36th. There's less than like 1 point between all of those movies. So it really
Jesus.
like getting that extra like half a point, whether that's from one of us or our listeners or the critics, really can make the difference between a movie maybe being in the top 10 and being in the top 30. So. We're definitely getting to that point in our leaderboard, which is great. This is what we want. We want this sort of things, and it also just goes to show, whilst we also have our own personal preferences, like a lot of these movies, even though we think this is a fucking great movie, this movie's maybe not as great. It recognizes that there's maybe not that much in it when you really come down to it and boil down to it, and it takes, I think, into account all the different aspects of different kinds of genres that you can't really compare to one another as well. I think for me, the most difficult one with that is horror comedy movies. It's so difficult sometimes to rate a horror comedy comparing it to just straight out horror movies because
Oh yeah.
a lot of people just don't take horror comedy movies seriously. We've obviously got quite a few.
Oh, you're not meant to, are you?
Well, no, but you know what I mean. They don't take them seriously as a movie. Fuck you, Nico. But we've got quite a few
You okay there?
We've got quite a few horror comedy, or at least a few horror comedies in our sort of top 20. We've got Zombieland in there. We've got Cabin in the Woods. We've got Dog Soldiers.
Shaun of the Dead.
We haven't covered Shaun of the Dead yet. So
Not yet.
it's
Oh.
not on our leaderboard yet.
That will be getting chucked in.
But that would for me that would definitely be up there in that sort of bracket as well. And,
Oh, yeah.
I've been holding back from picking it because I thought he would have by now.
Yeah, I'm surprised that you hadn't picked it by now.
Wasn't that the very first movie that me and you collaborated on? Was Shaun of the
Yes,
Dead?
it was. That's why I was like, you haven't done?
No,
Right,
that
yeah.
was the very first movie that me and Candy ever did a joint episode on, and that was for
A
the
while
show.
ago.
That was a lot. Yeah, we're talking probably about 4
Years.
years ago. Yeah. So, but like I've gotten a lot of shit from some of our fans for having those movies so high up the list, and it's like, well, they're
Fuck 'em.
they're really. Wow. That's what Nico thinks of all your opinions, listeners.
This is what I think of it is if you kind of see a comedy horror being good because it's a comedy horror, then there's something wrong.
No,
it's there to entertain you that way.
I don't think people are saying they're not good because they're not comedy horror. Because they're comedy horror. I just think they don't.
Oh no, a lot of people say that. A lot of
I
people
think
say
it's harder
comedy
to
horrors are
rate
shit
a
'cause they're
comedy horror because you have to take into account the horror and the comedy. And sometimes there's dramedy in it, so it's like a drama, comedy, horror. Like there's a lot of more aspects and it can get a little dicier on rating them. I'm a fan of horror comedy, so.
It's such a fine
I'm a fan of horror. Yeah. The thing is, I've spoke to people about this so many times, and the most common thing they say is, well, it's not really a horror, is it? It's meant to be funny. It's meant to be a horror at the same time.
But they're getting eaten alive by fucking zombies, or they're getting killed by vampires.
Right, like Evil Dead 2. Does it have plenty of like guts and gross stuff? Yeah. Is it hilarious? Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, hello.
We've got a lot of Evil Dead movies to cover as well, so.
Well, you picked the right person.
I think we've covered 2 Evil Dead movies, right? We've done
because I hate that.
We've done
I hate them all.
No, you see, Nico, it doesn't work anymore. Because you fucked it up when you tried to convince Candy that you didn't like Stephen King. You can't just.
My son's name is Ash.
Yeah. We've done Army of Darkness.
What's your favorite one?
2.
2.
My order is 213. When I've had a lot of fights about that order.
See, I'm 231.
That's how most people are.
I'm
One,
but I
better.
chop and change. I chop and change between 2 and 3 though, because I love Army of Darkness. I think it just ups it to the
I got to
comedy
see
factor.
it with Bruce Campbell presenting it in like the first 3 rows last year. And that was cool as shit. But then when he did, like, I wore a low cut dress and I was jumping around like, Mr. Campbell, Mr. Campbell. And he's like, you. And I was like, yeah, boobs work. They're great. And he was like, what's your question? I was like, so what's your favorite Evil Dead movie? And I was like trying to be all like a typical Candy there. Hey, what's your favorite? He's like, what do you want it to be? I said 2. He said, then it's 2.
Typical Bruce Campbell.
Boobs for the win.
Just to put it out there, I'm reboot 2 Evil Dead Rise just to like really piss people off. That's my... Anyways,
get out.
We're not here to talk about the Evil Dead franchise, guys.
No, we are not.
Sidetrack people, anyway.
We're on horror comedy and we're going a way different direction.
With that being
I
said,
know we're not even doing a horror comedy, it's the worst bit.
You talking about this fucking movie is hilarious. We're gonna go on in today's episode. We're talking all about Misery. This movie,
the greatest horror comedy ever.
Yes, this movie was released in 1990, was directed by Rob Reiner and stars Kathy Bates, James Caan and Richard Farnsworth. The IMDb plot is as follows, because I actually wrote it down this week. After a famous author is rescued from a car crash by a fan of his novels, he comes to realise that the care he is receiving is only the beginning of a nightmare of captivity and abuse. Okay. I think we're all Stephen King fans here.
Yeah, safe to say.
Despite Nico's little trick that you played in the last episode.
Provoking of me.
Yes.
Your face is a picture.
what in terms of like the novels of Stephen King, because obviously I don't think you can talk about any Stephen King adaptation without talking about his work in general, because I think it's a lot of it's quite interwoven. In terms of his novels, what's everyone's favorite Stephen King novel?
That's hard.
I like the Dark Tower series, so that's 8 books. Yeah. I don't know if I can count that as one. Can that pass? Or do I have to pick one?
We can give you that.
Yeah, I'll take the Dark Tower series.
See, I like that as well, but it's long. So I like it. But I don't like. But I don't. I got broken for a change. That's not fair, right?
See?
I'm not a very, very big reader, but Stephen King is something I'll read because I'm really badly dyslexic, so it gets jumbled in my head and I end up throwing the book away normally. Stephen King's like one of the only ones that I can actually go from start to finish with. So I struggle reading a lot of stuff. And I see Misery, It, and like those 2 are the ones that I remember reading first, if you know what I mean. And they always have a special place for me. So I chop and change between them sometimes.
I mean,
but yeah, Dark Tower is amazing though.
I mean, obviously, Stephen King is a lot better writer than he is a director, and we'll probably get into that as well.
That's for goddamn sure.
We'll definitely get into that.
What do you mean?
We'll definitely get into that. I'm kind of with you, Nico. It is my favorite Stephen King novel. For similar reasons, it's the first one of his that I read, and so it's always just been like that sort of special one for me. But in terms of adaptations, let's go into adaptations, because I think it's safe to say there have been varying degrees of success when it comes to Stephen King adaptations. And obviously, we've had a chat about The Shining, Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining, and we all have varying opinions on that. The public
famously hate that.
Yeah, the public have, varying opinions on that. I personally really, for as much as I dislike Stanley Kubrick because, he's a piece of fucking shit,
True.
I really love that movie. I think The Shining's fucking great. It's far superior to Doctor Sleep, but we'll not get into that. Debate. But there's such a huge variety in adaptations, and shockingly, the worst Stephen King adaptation is the one that he directed himself, because Maximum Murder
Yes.
is fucking abysmal.
That is just coke-fueled chaos.
But it's so bad, Nico. We covered that, I think, didn't we? For
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm pretty sure we said it there.
Yeah,
and then.
Maximum Overdrive. Oh God, I remember when it came out because I'm older than you guys. When it came out, I was so excited because I was started reading Stephen King when I was really young. Because I always read like way above my level. My mom would let me read things, and then she'd explain things maybe I didn't understand, like as a child, like what is sex or something. But yeah, I mean, it was just like I rented that and I'm like, God, that really sucked. And I was like a kid, like 6 or 7. Like, wow, that's really awful. She's like, yeah, it was pretty bad. And then later on, he's like, I was on cocaine the whole time. I'm like, yep.
Yeah.
Sure
you can
were,
tell
buddy.
that one scene where he's looking up, like, from the camera up the way, where he's at the ATM bit. You can tell he is fucking on it. Like, that's the reason he's at that ATM, to get more coke.
Yeah.
No, it's a fucking terrible movie. But, you know, like I said, and I think the thing for me is a lot is, Stephen King is obviously just widely known as this being like this horror director, but of course there's some really great non-horror movies that he's got adaptations out there as well. When you think of things like Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, which is actually a personal favorite of mine, especially movie-wise, because
Green Mile's good.
The performances I think in that movie are incredible. But
sure are, boss.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for acknowledging that I'm the boss, Nico. Thanks. But, you know, whether it's The Shining or Carrie or The Mist, which I think sometimes people get sort of a little bit forgotten about, or It, or this movie, Misery, I think it's safe to say that, you know, some of the biggest movies out there, some of the most successful movies, some of the most popular movies are Stephen King movies. And that is a credit to him as a writer, because he writes fucking batshit insane off the wall stuff. That's what happens when, you know, you're coked out of your nut for so much of your life. But you know,
nobody mentioned Cujo. That's fucking epic.
But this is what I'm saying. There's so many other stuff you could mention, whether it's, you know, Pet Sematary, or it's Thinner, or it's whatever it is. Like there's so much work out there. You know, it's really is. And then yeah, so for me, Stephen King definitely Stephen King is he in our Hall of Fame?
He should be.
If I put him in.
I can't remember.
I remember voting for him, but I don't know if he made it. Because usually whoever I vote for is the person who doesn't make it.
He didn't make it in, I don't think. Yeah, I think I'm mixing up because I put him in the other podcast that we did. I remember that.
Was that what it was? No, he is. He is already in our Hall of Fame.
He is actually in our.
You put him in the very first year, Nico. He was your first choice.
I thought it was the last podcast that we did.
I think he very possibly was in the old podcast as well, but yeah.
I'm probably mixing up. I'm awful for that.
But this is what I'm proving. Like, you know, he was your very first pick on this show to go into our Hall of Fame, and I think that just speaks volumes about the impact that he's had on horror. There's absolutely no denying that horror just would not be the same today if it weren't for Stephen King. Like he is, you know, he's created genres. He's influenced it so much, and you know, I think he needs to be commended for that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Misery then, and this movie, I remember when I was like first watching this movie. I first watched this movie when I was like really young. I was like maybe 8 or 9. I was
about 10, yeah.
I remember really not liking this film very much, and I remember
probably because of like your age. It's definitely skewed towards younger viewers. I was 10 when it came out, so.
And I remember
almost 11.
As I was going through like my sort of teenage years, when it was maybe like 15, 16, I'd rewatched it, and I remember thinking that James Caan was just given like this really bland performance, and I was like, and as I've gotten older, obviously I've learned to sort of love and appreciate this movie to the point now where I actually think it could be considered one of the best Stephen King adaptations there is.
I think he's really good in it as well.
Oh no, that's what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. Like my opinion of it came so.
When you were younger,
especially when you come from a position of, I think that's a mix of like if you grew up watching The Godfather with James Caan in it, you're getting a different James Caan in this film. And from this is definitely like against type for him. So I think it's something that Misery is something you understand better when you're older. You have some more life experience.
I think so. I think when you realize just how far sort of out of his own comfort zone James Caan was when making this movie, because apparently he had to spend like, he had to spend like 15 weeks in the bed while they were filming all of those scenes. And as you know, James Caan doesn't, he's notoriously not like a reactionary character. So for him to do this was so far, and then when you take that into consideration and you look at his performances as a whole, I think he gives a fantastic performance. I think in terms of like, it's a shame for him in terms of performances that he's still so outshone by the absolutely incredible Kathy Bates. Because
come on, there's not a lot of people that outshine her.
Well, and also you got to, as a former actor, it's you want those kind of media roles, because when you're in a role like, Annie Wilkes with, Kathy Bates playing her, it's a media role than playing like Paul Sheldon, which you have to do very understated. As an actor, if I was trying out and I had to be one of those characters, I would be Annie Wilkes, because it'd be so fucking fun to do. You can do a lot more and do some crazier shit. So I think, in those roles, people get noticed for those roles.
You can go OTT in it and it would still fit. You know what I mean? That's the thing about it.
And she
does, his one's got to be more calm and more demure, Yeah,
but she absolutely does. Let's be real. Like, Kathy Bates absolutely chews the scenery out of the fucking shit out of the scenery in this movie. And
having read the book before seeing the movie, I mean, she's exactly how I pictured Annie.
Yeah, and it's and she gives such a great performance to the point where Stephen King actually wrote future characters with Kathy Bates in mind to play them in adaptations as well.
Like Dolores Claiborne and
so that's and I think you'd be hard pressed, even if someone's not a massive fan of this movie. I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone who wouldn't agree that Kathy Bates is by far is absolutely incredible. She won a fucking Oscar. It's and how notoriously difficult it is for people in horror movies to win Oscars for fucking anything, because horror movies are so fucking criminally underrated by the media,
unless they're thrillers,
especially back then as well.
Yeah,
like 90s, it was really hard.
Absolutely.
But I think the thing for me is as well, like, when you think about it and you think about like sort of the zeitgeist of horror, and you think about all of your big sort of horror villains and all of your really sort of memorable scenes, and whether that's Freddy Krueger and Welcome to Primetime, bitch, whether that's fucking even other Stephen King movies, whether that's Georgie and the drain scene from It, these are all things that are like super fucking memorable. Whether that's the scene with the priest outside the house in The Exorcist, all these really, really memorable moments. And I personally think you can think of 3 or 4 different ones in this movie alone. And they're usually just fucking Paul Sheldon waking up and Annie Wilkes just standing over him with like that sort of dark light. And it's
the bit with the piss that always gets me, First just shaking a bottle, and I'm like, every time, you know what I mean? It's like, what the fuck, man?
I'm your number one fan.
It's like, oh, geez, she's got to take out a Rooney Buck and drink it. That's how fucked up she is.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Well, we don't kink shame on this podcast, so if that's what she wants to do, that's what she wants to do.
She's either bathing in it or gargling it. It's one of the two.
Wow.
But you're like twitching. You're like, God, no.
Honestly, like, someone just like walked over my grave when you said that. Like, I actually couldn't think of anything worse. Just like, you try and like picture it and imagine waking up, because at this point, right? Obviously, she's saved him from this car crash.
Yeah.
And she's taken him back to her house, and she's fixed him up. And at this point, we don't really know like the passage of time at this point, whether that's maybe he's only been out for a few hours, he might have been out for days, he might have been out for fucking weeks. We don't know at this point. Obviously, we find out that it's really not like a huge amount of time. But imagine waking up in a strange house, knowing you've been in a car crash, to someone just staring over you going, "I'm your number one fan." I'd be like, "Get me the fuck out of this place!" Like that.
Seeing it pissing the bed, like I think I would. That's got to be horrifying. But what I really like about this story in general is that Stephen King really put himself. Paul Sheldon is a side of himself, in this. all those constant reader #1 fans that he has out there, like, what if, what's the fun game to play when you're a writer? What if? And the story does that brilliantly. And it's just, yeah, that's an iconic thing, like you said, very much.
Yeah.
Plus, your #1 fan, it depends what she's.
We would call them a stan these days, which is not a good. When people say I'm a stan for that, I'm like, what that is a reference to, right? Not a good thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you've just started DJing. You'll get a #1 fan, even if you're the shittest DJ in the world.
I already have one.
Have you got it? How hot? Right. Here's the thing. How hot is she?
Well, that's subjective, isn't it?
In your personal opinion, how hot is she?
All right.
Would you? That's the question.
Oh no! I'm
not going to answer that on the podcast.
Because this is the thing, right? If you get your #1 fan coming up to you and they're like, you're hot as hell, what you prefer, it goes a totally different way from being creepy. It goes, well, this is going to be good.
But it could be like something who's insanely hot, but maybe not very hinged.
Yeah.
Like,
it could go really
crazy
wrong.
Hot scale.
You're gonna
the crazy hot
so
scale.
you're gonna be like, oh, that's fine. We're gonna have sex, but so you're basically basic instincting it. Then
you'll end up with a stalker if you have sex with her. That's the difference.
Well, but don't have sex with him. It's really not that difficult, is it?
Generally, not supposed to do that with your fan base.
It always happens.
I will say I'm very glad that this movie didn't go down that kind of route when it comes to things like that, because I think, like you said, we'd have been talking about a very different kind of movie, and I don't think that kind of movie would have been anywhere near as good as the kind of movie that we got.
No.
So I'm very glad they didn't go down that route. But I completely agree. Like, it's really interesting, to. And you do make a valid point in there as well, Nico. About
it's perspective is what I was meaning.
About like your #1 fan, and you really don't need to do a whole lot to garner a fan base, if that makes sense.
Nope.
Like, whether that's writing, acting, podcasting, DJ, like any form of entertainment, and you will, as long as you're mildly charismatic, which I like to think I am.
Or you post a decent picture on Instagram in your inbox. If you were, I know this happens to men as well, but as a female, and I'm married, I'm in my 40s, I get some pretty disturbing, DMs, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've had.
It's where you just get the nude sent to you, and you're just like, what the fuck? Not even a hello, right? It's just a full naked body. You're like,
Nico's like, okay, I want you to wine and dine me, please.
Not even a hi.
Hi.
I've
like
had
the creepiest one I had. The creepiest one I ever had was a girl had sent me one on Facebook, and it was just her butthole.
Oh no!
Like not even a hello. Nothing, just a butthole. And I'm like, what the fuck?
How do you know it was
What the fuck is this shit? That's the
you
thing.
Can guess what mine were.
Did you?
Yours is guaranteed dick pics. So that's 100%.
Did you?
So whenever I show them a shot, I'm like, you gotta look at this dick. This can't be real. This cannot be a real dick.
Oh.
I said this is from the other podcast that we did. I don't know if I've told you this story or not, but I was DJing one night and the girl found out I did the podcast. She's like, I really like your voice in that, because I sing when I'm doing it as well. She's like, I like the fact your voice is different to the way you sing. I'm like, all right, fair enough. So I told her about the podcast. She was on the podcast thing. She fucking heard that I think it was It or something like that. And she basically sent a clown sitting on her lap and nothing else on. It was perfectly placed to cover everything. I'm pretty sure it was It we were talking about.
Oh.
So yeah, that was quite
creepy. I'm not gonna lie, guys. I really didn't think this is what we were going to be talking about.
I'm surprised by the turn of events myself.
We've all
dealt with my first fucking rodeo, I guess.
I'm 43 now. That's how old I was on my birthday. And for 20 odd years, I've DJed. And I've DJed in different places in the world, and I'm not gonna lie, the ones abroad are even crazier.
I bet.
So yeah, you've got all that to come yet. Oh no, you think that? No. Scottish women are normally quite sane compared to the rest of Europe. Trust me.
Wow. Okay, well last week we lost our Canadian audience. This week we're losing our European audience. Nico,
hey, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Nico, I'm just saying they are more crazy.
Please leave us.
You gotta remember, it's the crazy hot scale. Barney has introduced everyone to this now.
Okay. I've completely forgotten what the fuck we were even talking about before this
I don't know.
In relation to Misery.
It was the perspective of if you find the person attractive or not that's your number one fan. I was trying to get across.
Okay. No, listen, I get that. Like, listen, well, I think whether you're a guy or a girl, obviously it's different for women because, like you say, I'm sure the number of DMs that women get in comparison to like the number of DMs we get, the scale will be like so at polar opposites.
You get victim blamed as a female a lot. Like, were you posting something sexy? No, I'm not sexy. It wasn't that, I promise.
Yeah. So like that scale is totally different. As obviously someone who's not DJed for anywhere near as long as you have, Nico, because I've only really been doing it for about 6 to 7 months now. But having
that's normally when you get your number one fan coming up.
Well,
just after about a month and a half.
Having people who do like the things that I do, and I've had people come up and listen. I did a Valentine pub quiz a couple of weeks ago, and I made a bonus round where I said I started off the poem "Roses are red, violets are blue," and I asked all the participants to finish the poem in various funny and amusing ways for like bonus points. I thought it was really fun. And I can tell you that I got 4 different girls' phone numbers back. I got 3 propositions to go into the toilets to engage in some lewd activity, which I would just like to say at this point I rejected. This shit fucking happens. Like these.
Have you had the DJ box one asked for yet?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the go-to for girls for some reason. Yeah. They want to come behind and dip down.
My experience has always been guys in bands, and I learned very quickly throughout my 20s that that's a bad thing for me.
That's creepy. A guy in a band.
No, seriously, there are plenty of women who in a band, like who plays music.
On a band, I thought you said a band. I'm like,
no. But a guy in a band. They usually have bands that they do horrible things in. But I was a musician and I met guy musicians and I thought we would appreciate each other's musicianship. But those guys were all fucking slags. They were terrible people. And I learned very quickly, no.
Yeah.
Singers and drummers are the biggest slugs on the planet.
Yes.
And that goes for both sexes.
Guitarists too.
I'm not being sexist. That is the genuinely, drummers and singers are worse than the guitarist.
I was with a guitarist and a singer. Bad mistakes.
But this is also like what I'm sort of talking about as well, because so obviously we've all had varying levels of this, and I'm certainly not saying that every single person who approaches a musician or a DJ and says, "Oh, I'm a big fan," and they want to sleep with them or whatever. I'm not saying they're all crazy, because some of them.
No, but you will get the crazy ones coming.
No, but this is what I'm saying to you though. This does translate to the film as well, because I don't know if you guys feel about this, but I think as this film sort of progresses on, because I am desperately going to try and drag us back to the film.
I should be helping. I'm sorry.
I think as the film progresses as well, I do feel like Annie Wilkes thinks that there is a more romantic element in this as well.
Yeah.
That's
why I was bringing it up. A couple of times
that she's like, "I love you," and he's like, it's kind of like he has a look on his face, like seen, like read the message, not responding. Like a mental version of that. She definitely feels that way. We don't get the backstory. This is I have to bring it up. The book, obviously there's a lot more you can do in a book than a film. And I did read the book prior to seeing this. And, she's like, "I love you." And he's kind of like, what would you do in that situation? I think when we watch a lot of these horror films, we think, what would I do? And I'm like, would you try to reciprocate that because you feel your life is at stake? Like, would you fuck your way out of this? Would you try to fake a romantic relationship?
100%.
I think if I knew that my life was in danger and that this person was trying to keep me captive and potentially ultimately going to kill me, I probably would, yeah.
It very much feels like
100%.
that's his only power move, is
Yeah.
to
Well, he
have
sort
some
of
sort of
uses that.
relationship with her, whether it's I'm gonna write for you, being like her own Sherazade or whatever. Um, he's got to give her something, some kind of relationship, even if it's a friendship, like, hey, Annie, let's have dinner with me tonight. She's like, oh, Paul, So that's where he sees like he has some power here, but it's in a situation that none of us really want to get down to the wire in. Like, can I fake this? Can I do this? But I think when it comes down to the wire and you get into this mental de-evolution of Paul, like you see that it's absolutely on the table after a certain point. Like, yeah, I'll do whatever I got to do.
Yeah, that's why I was bringing up the whole, like, if you found him attractive or not, because if you watch the movie, towards the end of the movie, he's using that to his advantage because he's making out he's wanting to have that relationship with her. He's using that to escape. That's why I was bringing it up.
Right.
I know I went off on a tangent with it, but that's sort of why I was bringing it up.
We've never gone on a tangent on this podcast. I don't know
Never.
And me, I've never gone on a tangent in my life.
But no, it is a valid point. It's a valid point to bring up because you're right, and I think he does absolutely use that to his advantage. Even in that final scene where he knows the gig is up, he knows she plans to kill him. She's planning this murder suicide. But even right there at the very end, he's still using that to his advantage when she comes in with the Dom Perignon, as she says. And he's like, oh, but we're gonna need 2 glasses for this one.
And she's just like,
and she's like, oh, Paul, and it's just like he absolutely uses it to his advantage. But as you said, Candy, it's in a situation where he either does that or he's fucking dead. Because if he didn't do that, that would have happened. She'd have shot him and then shot herself, and it would have been fucking game over. So
right. So like, I think any of us, when it came down to the wire, we would absolutely do the same thing.
Yeah.
No matter
100%.
how gross or weird you felt about it, like, sure, that's all I got going for me right now. This is the only thing I can use because my body has failed me and I'm not strong enough. I'm locked in this place. She's got a gun. What can I do? I can romance her.
Yep.
I think
the thing is, you use whatever tool you could to survive.
True.
This is the thing that everyone forgets about horror movies. It's an escape, right? You're looking at this half the time going, well, that person's a fucking dumbass because they should have done this instead. And a lot of folk that like watching horrors, a lot of them would probably survive it because they would have shagged her well before that to get out of there.
Yeah.
But the thing is I think this is one of the things about this movie is there isn't really that sort of there's maybe 1 or 2 moments in the movie where you're like, oh, why have you fucking done that? But there isn't really a lot of that moments. I think the biggest one for me is when he's like looking around the house and he puts the penguin back, like the little statuette back the wrong way.
And you're like,
but he's not going to know that.
Well,
so
no,
but
I think the thing is for me is I think he maybe would have known that because he's so careful about everything else, even to the point where he's like, oh, I better shut this, like, because when he's like, we're rolling back in, he notices he leaves like the living room door open, and he goes back to close it, and it's like, I don't know about you guys, but I can't fucking remember whether or not I leave like doors open or stuff.
I don't usually pay attention.
Exactly.
I have
So
ADHD and I don't medicate for reasons. I can't write books, oddly enough, when I take ADHD medication, but like that penguin is very important in the book. And, anybody who knows it's kind of like, and they do zoom in on it, but it's like, we do get that kind of adrenaline rush of it almost breaking. So maybe he was just like, shit, so I can kind of excuse it because of that.
Yeah,
that's exactly it. Yeah.
I think
because it is one of those things. You're not looking at every single ornament where they are. You're like, shit, I'll put it back. It's like if you're at a house party, you knock something over, you pick it up. You didn't know where it was, roughly, but you put it down just to, as close as you think it would be in your head.
Especially you're thinking, at least it's not broken.
Yeah,
exactly.
So you can get away with that one right away.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think one of the things for me as well, and it's going back to that sort of like romantic aspect that we were touching upon as well. One of the great things for me about this movie is like, obviously, when we get these sort of big reveals towards the end of the film, whether that's and we get hints about about her past as the movie goes on. She randomly brings up at one point about oh, when I was on the witness stand in Denver, and we're like, why were you on the witness stand? But we don't know about it at this point. Obviously, later in the movie, we then find out that she's this like killer nurse who's been killing newborn children. But up until that point, that we as a viewer, we also like can't see past the mask, and we can see that the mask slips at various points. You know, when she's having that argument of him about the profanity in his book, which speaking of horror comedies, gives that sort of funny scene.
It's hilarious.
Where she's
one bastard of a check.
Yeah, you know, when she's
healthy or whatever.
Through all those examples, and the mask starts to slip. But I don't know if you guys felt the same. But in the beginning, I really did think that she didn't have the intention of killing him. That there maybe was just a more romantic angle to this, which we do see. But we obviously then know about her past as well, which means ultimately there maybe wasn't that, and she just kind of wanted to like replace him, because that was also sort of her theory at one point, was that she, especially, it was a theory she gave Buster, and I will come on to Buster because I want to talk about him. And there is, but obviously, like, she was playing off to him that she's going to replace Paul. It wasn't even a case of it was going to be murder suicide. She was going to replace.
I never really bought that one though, because if she felt like she could write these stories, she would have been doing it long ago. I know when I first read Stephen King, wasn't a number one fan or anything, but I thought I want to do this with this kind of thing. So I started writing, and it's shit for a long time, and then you finally get good and you find your own voice. But like, if she could write these stories and generate them, because she's much more of a voyeuristic type. She loves the romance. She doesn't get romances. She wants to read about them because then they're pure. They don't, there's nothing to corrupt them. And then, there's these historical romances of all things, which are very, very moral, upright kind of books. I've read them. But like, so
mommy porn is what we call it, Mills and Boone.
But like, like speaking of like when I said, his Sherazade, like, in playing that, it's like an old tale, Middle Eastern, telling tales to save your life and continuing telling these stories as a way to buy your life. Like, oh, there's more though. So it becomes that to her, and she loves the entertainment, like mentioning the chapter plays, which she does at one point, or the serials or whatever you want to call them, that they used to do back in like the 40s and the 50s and the 30s and all that shit. She likes the entertainment, and she doesn't want to have any part of it. She calls it magic, and she doesn't possess that magic, but she wants to partake in that magic. So she, more, that's, I think, the reason why she keeps him alive. Like, you killed this Misery that I love. So, and Misery has so many uses here, but like Misery, the character, you killed Misery. Now you got to bring her back. You got to write your way out of this, because you're going to fucking entertain me, or I'm going to fucking kill you.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Arabian Nights and its divinity there,
Right.
Yeah, and it's like you say, Misery is like extrapolated as well. We're not just talking about Misery as the character. She's like, killing off the misery. You're bringing that misery into her life as well. That as an emotion. Because again, I go back to it as well about the sort of past, the past, sorry, of Annie Wilkes, and we find out in this movie, and it's been a long time since I've read the book, so I can't really remember a huge amount about it. But obviously in the movie she references the fact that she used to be married and it is no longer, that he left her. I can't remember if that's a big sort of plot point in the book.
Yeah, he divorced her.
Yeah, is it not in the cuttings in this?
Is it?
Yeah,
is it in the
I think so, if I remember rightly.
I couldn't remember if I saw it in the cuttings.
I think it's one of the first ones in her scrapbook, because it progressively gets worse. So I think it's one of the first ones you always forget,
Yeah.
It does mention something about it.
It starts with the father, and then moves on. She marries this guy, and then they get divorced. He divorced her, and they make a point of it being like he divorced her, because it's rare. Usually a woman divorces the man.
Yeah. And does it? I'm really sorry if I'm being ignorant here. I cannot remember it. Does it say in the book why they divorced?
He started seeing how unhinged she could be.
Okay.
And they began to argue, and she let him live, which is rare. But one thing they don't reference in the movie, which I think would add a little bit of more aspect into the film, I do wish the movie was about 30 minutes longer. I'm going to go ahead and say that, because I really think we could benefit from some of these enriching tales like that are in the book a little bit more. But like, there was another guy, this hitchhiker she picked up. She had a sexual relationship with him. He was like a lot younger, and she cut him up in the bathtub. And disposed of him in the way that she disposes of Paul Sheldon's car, which we do find in the movie, but not in the book. So this is something she's done before, sort of. But this is her favorite writer. It was just like happenstance.
I think
perfect timing for her.
Right.
It's the perfect thing for her would be him, and it's the book as well. See, when she's setting fire to the book in the movie, it's brilliant, I think, because the way that happens and she's flicking it over him, and you're like, oh shit, it's gonna really go.
There's that really sort of tense standoff between them as well, where he's trying to obviously bluff his way out of burning the book, and he's like, oh, there's loads of copies out there, and she's just like, well, do it then, on you go. There's that really sort of tense I really love that moment.
But also not counting on his number one fan knowing his rituals.
Yeah, because you feel like, especially also in the earlier part of the movie, Paul Sheldon is underestimating Annie Wilkes so much.
Very much.
And what she knows and what she's actually capable of, because, I think it's like one of the sort of questioning parts of this movie. I'm like, well, in real life, would Kathy Bates be able to drag James Caan out of that car and
she's pretty sturdy, who knows,
but
the crazy scale
well, that's what I'm saying, so like there's one of the things just on that note as well. I don't think he's surviving that car crash anyway, but that's by the by, to be honest. It's just a suspension of disbelief. But one of the things I want to talk about, because like obviously there's a huge thing about sort of mental health in this movie as well, and mental illnesses, because it's very, very clear that Annie Wilkes as a character suffers from a multitude of mental illnesses, and there's that sort of aspect on it where you're like, well, is this something that had already happened to her, and then she went, was she sort of younger and had all these mental illnesses and went on to murder all these children, or did potentially her husband divorcing her cause her to have a psychotic break? There's those.
That's something I think the viewer has to figure out for themselves, and and you do yourself a disservice by not reading the Stephen King novel, because you do find out that this is something she's had since she was a kid. She was murdering kids in her apartment building, set it on fire, things like that. So it's something that she just has always had.
Right.
It's kind of like break.
Yeah, and like you say, obviously, the movie doesn't go into depth without a lot of those sorts of aspects. So for those of the people who are out there who maybe haven't seen or read the book, we are left to sort of go with our own sort of opinions on that. I always read it before I read the book. Like I say, it's been a long time since I read the book. I read it once, but before I read it, when I'd seen the movie, I had always gone with it was the husband divorcing her that had given her this psychotic break, because just because of the way she sort of brings it up and the way she sort of talks about it in the movie. And then obviously,
and her strange relationship with men, not knowing how to relate to them. I mean, and if for the purposes of the film, it really doesn't matter when it happens, because it already has happened. But it is neat. I wish we could have more time with the memory lane thing, because it does explain a little bit more. But for the purposes of the film, it really doesn't. It's not something you have to linger on. But it would be cool, like I said, if we had 30 more minutes to put into this movie, put a little bit of that in there.
I think
I would have liked more backstory in the movie. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. And one important thing, if I can just do it now, that I do wish was included in the film, like I said, those extra 30 minutes I would have put on as the director. There's a very important theme throughout Paul's captivity, and it is also keeping him prisoner as much as Kathy Bates or Annie Wilkes is his addiction to Novril. He's an addict. And that is its own kind of prison, its own kind of misery. And the whole reason he even has the nerve to break out of his room is she has disappeared to what is called her laughing place. And he has said no food, no drink, no drugs. And it's the drugs that make him go, because he's already drank his piss and everything else by then. The drugs make him break out of the room, and he goes, he finds her stash of what I'm assuming are codeine-based pills or morphine-based. And he's hooked on them so bad that he does that before food, water, anything else. That's the whole reason he leaves the room. And I think it's important.
Sort of touches on in the movie. Oh, sorry for cutting you.
It does a little, but it never shows him like full on addicted, because away he's stuffing those pills into the mattress with the plan and not taking them. Whereas in the book, he was like down him so bad, like he almost passes out or almost ODs at one point. So it's like, I really wish we could have included that. And I think if the movie was made now, it absolutely would be a longer,
100%.
Longer, because it's nothing right now to have a movie that's 3 hours long and people are going to sit for that. They're going to be fine with that. But in 1990, no, they would not. it just, unless you're fucking Martin Scorsese back then doing Goodfellas or something at that time period, you're not going to get away with a movie that long. So yeah, that's an important part of the story to me, that there's more than one prison. There's more, addiction is something that hits really close to home for me. And I think it's important just to have that represented. So I wish I could have, if I could direct this film, I would put that back in there. But the film does not suffer for it. It's just, it only suffers for me a little bit because I read the book first. I think if I'd seen the movie, then read the book, it would have been a different story. So that's my
I
gripe, my
saw it
one
the other
gripe.
way.
Yeah,
I saw it the other way, and I agree with you. But I
Okay.
saw the movie first and read the book after, and I agree with you. I would have liked it if it kept the addiction part in. I like the subtle nod that you don't really notice when you're watching the movie, where he breaks the pill and then tastes it, and then you see his brain sort of work out. That's what I'm needing. I like that. Watching the film the first time, you don't notice that,
Right.
but as soon as you read the book, you notice it straight away. And that's what I was trying to say. I would have it touches on it, but not properly. And I agree with you. I would have liked to have seen that in the movie, because just when he breaks it open and his eyes light up when he does it, and he does it so well, and it makes more sense if they'd had something about the addiction at that point.
And
It would
there's
have made
another
so
thing
much more sense.
about the addiction, but it has to do with the ending. I can bring it back up then if you'd like
no,
that.
you can carry on.
Well,
We
I,
don't
I
have any more.
like the ending in the book better. It does deal with addiction the entire time, including the ending. And the ending is much more bleak in the book, where it's just kind of like wrapped up. I got some trauma, but we're good. In the book, he's an alcoholic now. He misses the drugs so much that he wishes Annie was still alive and he was still prisoner, you
Yeah.
know? And it's like, and that's Stephen King again. This is his story, a version of himself. He was clean by then from the cocaine and the alcoholism. It's him writing his way out of it or dealing with his own trauma. And so, every person who's ever been an addict, and I happen to know some, um myself included, it's not a secret, it was a long time ago, but um bad circumstances in my life left me within two kind of prisons like this. But at the end, he's kind of like, there's this moments when you're weak, and he doesn't like relapse or anything, but he's like, I wish I was still back in that room with all the drugs and Annie was still alive, because then I'd have my fix. That's that hole that after you're an addict, it gets left there a little bit, different for everybody else, and some people can conquer that and some people can't. And I think it's an important part of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
100%.
combining those sorts of two messages, whether that's about addiction or mental health, I think
Yes.
these are two things that I think, if you're just looking at this movie on a surface level, that can be sort of overlooked almost.
Right.
But they're two like huge, absolutely integral parts of this movie. Because obviously, I've having sort of read up on it and knowing a thing or two about mental health issues myself. Annie Wilkes displays a variety of sort of symptoms or traits that are associated to mental health. She shows signs of being bipolar. She shows signs
Definitely
of,
mood disorder.
yeah, she
Absolutely.
shows signs of obsessive compulsive disorder,
Major depressive.
Yep, schizophrenia, Munchausen's. Like she definitely sort of displays a whole variety of these things, and that's why I sort of brought up the whole sort of point about the husband, because and it does sort of apply, I think, a little bit as well to what you were saying there about addiction too. That, again, speaking from personal experience, when you're going through like a really bad time and you're in your dark places and things like that, it's almost like there's a part of you missing, and there's a part of you missing, but you can't quite figure out what that part is for a lot of people. And some people use medication to help them sort of find that part or sort of forget about part, and that works for some people, and that's great, and other people don't. And it's just like a representation of like Annie. Well, obviously, again, going by the book, this is something that she's been doing since she was a small child. We don't get that in this film, so you are left pondering the questions. What has caused this? What makes her suffer? She's very isolated in this movie. She only goes into town to go to the shop, but we can see that there's no one else in her home. Her phone.
And she's very abrasive to everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the scene
Yeah.
where she has the argument with the other driver. When she's like going to the store to get the correct type of paper. You see how easily she snaps at Paul Sheldon, even though she's his number one fan. When he's like, "Oh, this paper doesn't work," or something along those lines. And so she's very isolated. The phone in her home isn't even real, so she has no other contact. She has no friends. There's no one there in her life. And
you start to realize why.
Yeah, 100%. So I just really love the way, like you were talking about addiction, like the mental health issues, like the character, like there's these layers, I mean, Jesus Christ, in our last episode we had the least layered characters, the least
and there were so many.
Yeah, there was just no depth in any of those. And then we come to here, and there's so much to get into with Annie Wilkes.
And there's a very sparse cast, honestly.
Well, yeah, because realistically, you've got your two main characters. Out with those, obviously you've got his agent, but she only really appears very briefly at the beginning and the end, and a couple of times in the middle.
Lauren Bacall, by the way.
And we've got the chief, the sheriff. Sorry, not the chief. The sheriff, Buster, and his wife, and
the deputy.
What
is it with that? Right, every fucking movie that has the wife as a deputy, they're always trying their luck in the car. They've married the budge, not the fucking copper, have they? Everyone.
I love his wife in this film.
She's a trip.
She's great.
Yeah.
I just like
keeping the spice in our marriage.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd rather be at home fucking darling than try to find somebody that could be deed.
When you're in this, you're my deputy, not my wife. And she's like, damn it.
Yeah.
Trying to do a really bad Southern accent here.
Do you want to put the cuffs on? Aye, let's go.
But she's she's really witty as well. There's that moment where she's like, "Oh, we got a phone call. Busy morning." She's really funny as well. But Buster, there's obviously this like huge trope in horror that the police are useless, and in this movie, Buster actually does good police work.
Yeah,
and gets fucking
does it right.
blown away for his troubles. But I
like that though.
Oh, okay.
I really like that.
No,
I do, but I was agreeing with you. I like that.
Buster starts to he's kind of like a combo of a couple different characters, and he goes out different than the book. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't expecting it when it happened. I thought maybe he'd leave, come back, then something would happen to him. Or maybe he'd make it all the way through. I really didn't know what to expect because I'm like, well, Buster's a character that's like a conglomerate of several. So how's this going to go? I mean, he's obviously not going to get run over by the lawnmower, spoiler alert for the book, or anything like that. So what's going to happen here? So that did leave me on the edge of my seat. Like, I like Buster. You can't help but like him. He's a likable guy.
Yeah.
And you're really like, oh man, he's doing some great police work for this sleepy little town. It kind of like you're blown away by it. You're like, shit.
Yeah, and I think
100%.
I think this is one of the things that this movie does really well because there's quite a few of those because I mean, horror fans love their villains, right? But you are rooting for James Caan and Paul Sheldon to get out of this situation in this film because we can sort of imagine the horror of it. There's no there is no supernatural element to this movie. There is no sort of this is purely like psychological. This is purely like this could happen, right? And so therefore we really want Paul Sheldon to get out of this situation. And there's so many of those oh shit moments, I think, in this film.
Let's get to some of those moments because there's the
hobbling.
Well, we'll start with the hobbling scene. Obviously, in the book, it's not a hobbling scene. She chops his.
It's a different kind of hobbling.
She cuts his foot off and cauterizes the wound, and but this fucking.
It's pretty brutal.
This fucking scene, and it's quite near the end of the movie that this scene actually takes place. It's
one of the few scenes in horror that actually make me go ooh.
But that's
what I said to him. I'm like, did you wince this morning when you saw it?
Yeah, but that's the thing.
I was gonna say I think I do more since I became disabled. The whole lower half of my body is affected. I have to use a wheelchair sometimes. I think it hurts me more now than it did before because I know what that kind of pain feels like. I have a pain pump, fentanyl in it, and I take codeine pills every day because it's just unimaginable pain. And I'm just like, and it is my foot, it is my leg, it is my hip. And I feel that the older that I get, and now that I'm disabled, I'm like, oh, fuck, man. God. Ow.
So I was out of commission for 3 years. I couldn't work for about 3 years, just under, because of an ankle injury. And same thing. Before I was like, ooh, that hurts. Now it's as if that ankle just instantly goes again. It is as soon as she lifts that sledgehammer up and hits the first one. Honestly, it feels like I need my uncle operated again. I'm like, how does it even get to your brain that way? It's
It's
just
very
so well done.
visceral, and it seems to affect people on a very visceral level because much like, I represent Fulci, but like, goes for the eyeballs and the fingernails because that is where people go, oh no, you want to cover your eyes. You feel that kind of pain. And if you felt any kind of pain like that, and for such an understated effect, it really is, considering all the gore films I watch, it's really understated, but it's so fucking well done. It's up
Yeah,
there. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's really good.
Well, that's the thing, like, because although there is that sort of brief moment where you do see his ankle go, it is very brief. It's there and it's away. But like it just leaves enough to the imagination, doesn't it?
I'm thinking it's K&B that did this. Early K&B, like Greg Nicotero's company.
Yeah.
I know Savini he was directing at this point. So I'm thinking K&B, who was like kind of the successors, did this and they did it just right.
Yeah.
They did it just right. Just showed enough.
They showed just enough. Just enough. Right. That's what 100%. It is literally just enough to make you go, fuck. And then it's just enough to make your mind, because that's what I mean by, like, before I ever had an ankle injury or anything, I didn't feel it as much as I did. Like, and it's just enough to trap it in your brain to throw it to you.
They don't even have to show the other foot because she gets both. You just see the one and you're like, I'm good, thank you. That's
what I was just about to say. Yeah, 100%. You don't even need to see the second one. Yep. So yeah, it's a really good one. Like,
and I think because there's this is a movie that's got little to no gore. It's not a particularly violent movie until the very end sort of scenes. Everything is psychological. Everything is verbal. That really goes through barring a couple of moments, but we're not talking about egregiously violent. When she throws the ream of paper onto his legs, which will hurt him because his legs are fucking broken. But it's not like a ridiculously violent scene. So for it to go from that and to this, like, that's so shocking for this movie. Like, that's a moment that's just like, we're watching this, sort of psychological horror movie that's, all about intensity and the tension of the scenes, and there is so many of them, and
it's brilliant pacing is what it is. Really holding out your fucking good cards till the end. Like, I'm gonna show you just a little, and when we get there, it's gonna be like slam. Here you go.
Because obviously at this point of the movie, he knows that she's not gonna let him go. I still think at this point in the movie he's not really 100% certain, like, just how far she go. Is she actually She's obviously mentioned it, because she mentions it pretty early on when the mask finally slips. That moment where she tells him, "I've not fucking contacted anyone, and if I die, you die." And but you maybe would still have that doubt whether or not she's actually capable of doing that if you were him as a character. And this scene obviously is the one that finally just sort of snaps at. And then after this movie, like, he obviously, during that sort of final confrontation, plays along just enough. But I really love that moment where she's like waving to him from out in the farm, and he just fucking gives her the middle finger. And at this point,
you fooler.
At this point,
she laughs about it. I'm like, I would be afraid to do that because I'd be afraid that bitch would come fuck me up.
Yeah, but at this point, like, he's just full on fuck you mode. Like, you've put me through so much imaginable pain.
Hey, you got to be psychologically thinking, like, at this point, man, check it out. Might not be such a bad idea. Yeah. And I know that's dark. That's fucking dark for me to say that because I am not a suicidal person. But I think everybody goes through pretty dark periods in their life. We're like, man, this is not going to get better. And you got to think he's at that point. Like, it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I think that's really sort of a testament to James Caan and the actual performance he gives, because I want to sort of take it back to the point I made earlier where, when I was younger, I actually found his performance to be quite bland, but then when you look into it and it's super, and how difficult it would actually be to, portray this sort of character who's going through so much pain and, is wanting to play along, but is mentally at the point where he can't play along anymore. Like, it's such a fine, like, a niche emotion that he needs to try and portray, and I think he does it absolutely perfectly. To that point, he's earlier on in the film where he is sort of like trying to lead her on and say, oh well, maybe you can give the book a title, maybe you can do that. Like, he's trying to, like, appease her to the point where he can make his escape attempts.
What is it? The grave digger's named after her or something?
Yeah, I do love the fact where she's like, you have to change everything, but keep that bit in.
Aye, that's the bit I was just going to say. Aye,
Um,
I'm sure it's a gravedigger.
yeah, I think it is the Gravedigger. But there, you know, like
Yeah,
there's so many other oh shit moments in this movie as well. And again, they're not even like big things. Like they're not big set pieces. But the moment I think the other big one for me is because you try and put yourself into his shoes is when they're having dinner and he spikes the drink and she spills the drink.
yeah,
Because we've spent so much time with him sort of concocting this plan. Right, he's gonna hide the drugs. He's gonna put all the drugs together. He's gonna knock him out, and he's gonna knock her out and gonna make his escape attempt. And just in that split second, that's all done. That's gone.
It's like,
can
fuck.
we start again? When
Yeah.
she says, "Can we start again?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, we totally can."
And can I speak on the score in that? And like I'm not a huge Liberace fan, but like the use of sound in this movie is so good. Um, using the Liberace like upbeat, strong piano, like kind of thing. And then later on the Moonlight Sonata on piano. I mean, I just think it fits really well.
Yeah.
Having this like fun Liberace thing, and then it toned down to a really dark piece like the Moonlight Sonata. So it's so great. And it meshes perfectly with what's going on the screen every time.
It's aye, 100%. Like the score in it does do this justice, and it's not often that a movie has that perfect score, and I think it is very, very good in this.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I would agree with both of you guys there. That's absolutely true. Spot on for me. I think one of the other things about this movie is like it just makes you feel uncomfortable. There's something just unsettling about so much that happens in the scene, and there's like whether that's like how Annie, what the things she says, because even right at the very beginning, she openly admits to him, "Oh, I was actually following you." That's like one of the first things that she says to him. I was following you. So
and you see that on his face, because it has to be a subtle performance, that kind of shock. Then like I have to register that this is okay.
Yeah.
Like that. What? Oh, but without any words.
Yeah.
So that's really well done.
And it goes back to some of the scenes we've already talked about as well. Whether that's the scene where she's shaking his pee at him, and it's just like she's not being like aggressive to him, but there's something just a little unsettling about it.
Or when she brings in Misery the pig, that's a little weird.
Yeah.
And then the scene where she gets
that's who I'm going to feed you to. That's basically what that is.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, but there's moments where you feel like physically. I don't know if you feel the same. There's moments where I felt like kind of physically uncomfortable watching this, and I'm not talking about anything that's particularly violent, but I'm talking about when he's trying to make his escape attempt, and you look at how sweaty he is, and you look at like and I think it just like portrays the pain and how uncomfortable he is, because I'm sure we've all done that. Not when we're trying to escape from being held captive, but I'm sure we've all maybe been in situations where we're either in pain or something, or we're ill or something like that, where you go to do something and it makes you sweaty, it makes you uncomfortable, and you're just left there. Or if it's just like a particularly hot day outside and you're all
it's basically your body just screaming back at you like, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah, and we all know how uncomfortable that. I don't know about you guys, but there's something about it in this film that just it gets under my skin a little bit. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I don't know if that makes sense.
One of the I've told you this story before, but like one of the creepiest things I ever had was I went back with a girl for a one night stand, and in the morning she was like, "Oh, I've lost my keys," so I'm locked in her flat, and she's like, "Oh, I can't remember where my keys are," and I'm like, "This is fucking creepy." And then I didn't tell her where I worked when I was DJing at the time, and 2 days later she appeared there.
Oh God.
I didn't tell her about a week and a half after that where I was working Sparky, and she just happened to be walking along the road when I was coming out for lunch. And I'm like, yeah, so that was one of the creepiest things I've dealt with.
That's scary.
Yeah.
Like it was way too much coincidences.
But
I wasn't caring too much because I was going to Norway like 3 weeks after that anyway. So I was like, I'm out of here. I've just got to deal with this for 3 weeks and then that's it. But even then, I still got like texts and like phone calls at random times and stuff. So yeah, I understand the whole creepy bit, because that one I basically jumped out the window from a first floor to go. I'm like, Yeah, I've got work to go to. I've definitely got to go. But I genuinely was like pissing a sweat, and I don't sweat that much.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I've got to go. Yeah, I've got to go to work. Although if I could see her doing this is just dropping from the fucking window. She's like, oh no, I'll find the keys. I'll find them. Don't worry. I'm like, oh, yeah, all right, fair enough. Bye.
You know she's probably listening to this podcast, right?
Watch out for your number one.
She knows who she is. If that's the case.
So, for everyone listening, Nico lives at. No, I'm joking. I'm not
I've stayed in 3 different countries since then. I'm fine.
Yeah, sure. But no, like I think this is just one of the things that this movie does so well. It's like, as I think one of you mentioned it earlier, like so much that happens in this movie is so understated, but it's so uncomfortable. It's so creepy. It's so tense.
And how you, I think, achieve that here is the subtleties, little things, by keeping most of the camera where Paul is. So in that room, locked in, that's unsettling. It makes me uncomfortable. I'm claustrophobic. There's all these little things, and then we have the score that's kind of telling us sort of how to feel when a good score is supposed to do that. And just these little subtle things that if you're paying attention and you're really into the movie, it puts you right on the edge because you're supposed to be there. And so that means it's doing a really good job by getting under your skin in very small ways that you don't even realize that it's manipulating you and into feeling this. And this is what a good movie should be doing, by setting the scene for you.
100%.
Oh, well, this is the second week. You've been on 2 episodes, and we're all in full agreement about the movies. We need. I think we're going to need to pick some movies that we all have very differing opinions about. But
I can supply those.
I'm sure we'll definitely find some.
We can supply those too. Don't worry.
I'm gonna open up.
Oh, I believe it.
The last point I have, and then again I'll open up the floor to you guys for any additional points that you guys want to make. Ultimately, I think this also goes down to something as, especially people with, addiction and mental health issues, going back to that, you're your own worst enemy. Because ultimately, had she just rescued him and taken care of him and saved him, she would have just ended up being like a lifelong friend. He probably would have dedicated a character name to her. He probably would have wrote stories about her and included her and been, so ultimately she's just her own worst enemy.
But also, she does say one telling line. She says, you don't know what it's like to have to lose someone like you.
Yeah.
Like a person of your caliber has no idea what it's like to lose a person like you.
Yeah.
I'm not a movie star type. I can't remember the exact spiel she says, but
yeah, it's not a movie star type. Yeah, she does say that.
Yeah, she's like, you don't know what it's like to lose a person like you. So and that's a really big clue into like she's never gonna let him go. And you also know that he's figuring that out at this point too.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh shit, she isn't gonna let him go. This can only win like in one way, and somebody's gonna die.
Yeah.
It's the only way.
Okay, like I say, I will open up the floor to you guys for any additional points that you guys want to make, or anything that I've not covered or we've not covered so far. Candy, anything else that you want to touch upon with this movie?
I don't know. There's so much. I don't really know how to sift through it all. Let me think. Like I said, I really wish we could have gotten a little more detail, but I think with the detail that we do get in the movie is enough to like her backstory. It doesn't matter. That you find out that she's a murderer. She's got some major undiagnosed and unmedicated, untreated mental health problems that are dangerous. Munchausen's by proxy, because she's harmful to herself and to others. Those are the kind of people that desperately need to be treated, and she's untreated, and she has isolated herself. And anybody who enters that domain is now in danger. And that it's keeping it so claustrophobic, keeping it so shut off was the way to do this movie. And I think it did a really good job at that. I like that. I think it was Rob Reiner did a fucking amazing job with it. And he started in comedy. I can't remember the show. Was it it'll come to me at a really random moment, but I don't remember it now. It was in the 70s to go on and do this and to direct a lot of other really great Stephen King adaptations, other great movies. But this was really like Rob Reiner doing something against his own type in directing. And I thought it was a fucking great job. Like, yeah, you did a fucking good job. You read the book, you understood the assignment, and you delivered.
Yeah, and I would agree
Yeah.
with that. Like, you know, reading the book, he it's so easy sometimes, and Stephen King I think has said this before as well, you know, about some of his adaptations, and I think The Shining is probably the best example of that, where, you know, they can make a lot of changes, and I think that was Stephen King was always apprehensive about people making changes from his novel. Obviously, as we all know, you can, like you said earlier, kind of, you know, you can do a lot more in a book than you can do in a film. Some things just don't translate, you know, from book to film, and changes have to be made.
I.e., the Dark Tower. But gladly, right now, that's in Mike Flanagan's hands.
Yeah.
And he is doing at least 5 seasons to cover 8 books. I think it's on Amazon has it. And I'm very much looking forward to that. But we've seen Stephen King works in other people's hands where it maybe didn't go so well, including his own as far as directing.
Yeah. Like the Dark Tower, you bring up the Dark Tower. I was looking forward to that so much, and I thought that was just awful.
I know. And I was like, they only did one movie. I was already apprehensive when I'm like, you can't just do one movie.
Yeah.
How are you going to do that? There's so much. There's 8 books and they're big books. And so
I thought they had a decent cast for it.
Lord of the Rings, you know?
Yeah. I thought they had a decent cast for it. But the problem was it was too short.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If they'd elaborated it, if they'd like what they're doing with Dune. Dune was one movie in, what was it, the 70s or 80s when it was out. And now they're remaking it and it's going to be like 4 movies they're talking about.
Well, that's a lot to cover. There's so many books in that series, you know?
Exactly.
And so like fans who are, you know, and the Dark Tower series has so many fans, like so many people were pissed, including myself. And I was like, when I right out of the gate, one movie, okay, this is gonna suck. And it did. But so like this Mike Flanagan, one, I trust him as a director, and two, I know he's going to be faithful and give us a lot. You know, when you have 5 seasons of a show as opposed to like a series of movies, even you can do so much more with it. So
I think as well, like you said.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well.
Regardless of whether, you know, what any of us think about Mike Flanagan and his work.
Sorry.
No. One thing
I keep bringing him up.
The one thing I can say though, like regardless of how I feel about his work or how I feel about, you know, Doctor Sleep in particular, you know, one thing he was faithful to that book, and you know, I will give him that. And like you say, he tried to fix what he felt or Stephen King felt were the wrongs of Stanley Kubrick's version, and
he tried to merge the two.
Yeah, and you know, I think if you're going to put it in somebody's hands, I think Mike Flanagan's obviously proven that he's the guy for Stephen King stuff at the minute. You know, he's the guy who can be trusted with his work, because again, for all the things I'll say about Doctor Sleep, I don't think it's a bad movie.
And it had a pretty good cast.
What was it you scored that again?
I can't remember. I don't see it on the leaderboard.
Oh, okay, fair enough. So it wasn't that bad a movie, no?
I just found my score, and
Flanagan has what I mean. Flanagan has what I like, taken from more of like grindhouse trash kind of exploitation directors. They have like a stable of actors, and one of his is Kate Siegel, his wife, who's in all of his stuff, and she's phenomenal. And Henry Thomas, who I grew up with in E.T., but he's still a fantastic actor, and he's in all of Flanagan stuff. I mean, we have a great stable of people that can pull his shit off. He's great, you know, like he's a great director, and he's got great actors that he works with all the time. So I like that about Flanagan.
Just on that note as well. Sorry, a slightly different note. Did anyone watch the Castle Rock TV show?
No, Sean did. I don't know why, but he would watch it because I tend to get up later in the mornings than he does. He gets up fucking 5:30 when he doesn't work. I'm like, what is wrong with you? And he was watching it, and I didn't want to start all the way from the beginning without him. And I was just like, I didn't feel compelled enough to do it on my own. I was like, no, that's all right.
So the sort of the pre-story to Annie Wilkes is the sort of central theme, I think, of season 2 of Castle Rock.
Yeah, I remember he was telling me about it. Yeah,
I've only ever watched like the first couple of episodes of it, and I remember it being all right. I can't remember why I didn't watch. I didn't stop watching it because I didn't enjoy it. I just think I didn't have the time at the time to like take on a new show, which sometimes for me is the issue with horror TV shows, because you know you need to invest a lot of time an effort into actually sort of keeping up with it.
Because then you got to fit in the movies and other shit that you do.
Yeah,
and
so
it's a lot.
It's something that I just wanted to check to see if either of you had seen it, and maybe you could furnish us with some more details about it. But I know that's a sort of central plot line in season 2, so I think I might go and try and check it out because I think it's on Amazon.
I remember it being confusing what I did learn, but I don't remember what it was that I learned. Like they're having this Annie Wilkes backstory, but it doesn't jibe right, and this character shouldn't be there. And
probably because they're also like throwing in all the other sort of universes that are part of Stephen King's wider universe. You know, makes it maybe just that little.
I thought it was ambitious sounding, but maybe too ambitious.
I can't remember if there was more than 2 seasons of it. I don't know how long it ran for.
I have no idea.
But I think it's maybe something
I've got a phone handy. Give me a second.
I think it's definitely maybe something I'll pick up. On that note, then, Nico, is there anything else you'd like to add about Misery?
Well, I was hoping you'd do a bit more filler because I was waiting to check how much Castle Rock seasons there were, but you've just cut me off, you motherfucker.
Well, I'm sure you're capable of doing more than one thing, you know, at a time.
No, I'm too careless for that. 2 seasons, by the way.
There was just 2 seasons. Okay, I thought there was
2 seasons.
Okay. No, are you done? Is that you done then? Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I liked about the movie was the smudge part when she's going on about the paper. You know, explaining it to her like a 2-year-old, and you can see she's pissed off but wrong at the same time. And she's like, "Oh, fine then," sort of thing. I did like that.
I think what comes to me is because that scene's a really good example of it as well. But even some of the other scenes, there's something, and it's also actually, you know, just to quickly get into it, something, you know, when we're talking about the other sort of like romanticizing moments of the scenes, you know, where we might think there's that romantic element between, well, as she perceives there to be that romantic. She's very childlike in a lot of her reactions and a lot of how she portrays.
Very coquette type, where it's like, oh, you know, like how I would act more when I was like reading, you know, Bram Stoker's Dracula when I was a kid. You know, like oh, it's so romantic.
Yeah, and
it's like girls sometimes do that. I'll pretend I'm dumb, they'll like me more, and I fucking hate that.
As a blonde named Candy, it has been useful, I will admit, but I only do it so people will think that I'm dumb, so I can like whoop their ass at being smart later.
Yeah.
See,
that I would love, but the ones that do it just permanently. Oh my god! Oh, you're so smart. Fuck off and die.
But society tells us that men want us that way. You don't understand the female experience. We're told we're supposed to be smart, but act dumb. We're supposed to be this and that. I mean, my real name is Candy, and people are like, well, that can't be right. Was your mom a hooker? You know, like they expect me to be dumb. Seriously, I had to go to
your mom a hooker.
Yeah, 3rd grade, I went home and I said, Mom, what's a hooker? She's like, where'd you hear that? I'm like, school. Because they're like, I'm blonde, I'm Candy, you know, I must be an idiot, or my mom was a prostitute or a stripper. People ask me if it's my stage name. I'm like, what stage? Like, no, it's my real name. So like somebody named Candy, why I chose the name Candy, the final girl, because the girl named Candy who's blonde would never be the final girl. So somebody has to represent.
But no, but I think ultimately, I think that's one of the other reasons why, you know, I find this movie so unsettling at times, because it is quite uncomfortable watching that. And like you say, she's in a very childlike state. She obviously has, like we've talked about earlier, with the mental illnesses, the undiagnosed mental illnesses she has. Whether that's some sort of trauma that's caused her to be like that, something's made her revert to this sort of childlike state. It makes me quite uncomfortable watching that and watching her.
Not to mention, she's armed with an ass load of hospital supplies and drugs, like Schedule 2 drugs that are impossible to get. So you know that, you know, she's nefarious if she has all this stuff, because it would be locked up in a.
She stole it somewhere.
Head RN would have a key to that, and she has a shit ton of it. And it's like, that's frightening.
Okay, right. Well, with that being said, then I'm going to move us on, because I'm just sort of looking at the clock and wary of the time. And
Are you falling asleep?
No, I'm not falling asleep. But it's very telling when we've got like a movie of depth, because you know, I think we're already about half an hour longer in this movie than we were when we did Army of the Dead.
Are you trying to tell me the last one was so in depth? It was just unbelievable.
Our review was perfect. Our review was perfectly in depth. Unfortunately, there just wasn't that much depth for us to review. So
exactly.
Like reviewing a puddle.
So
no, a puddle with an oil spill in it, because it was just fucking too much colors doing nothing.
0 out of 10 would not recommend this puddle.
Yeah.
3 out of 3 wouldn't fucking recommend the puddle.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm going to move us along and we're going to talk about some trivia. As always, we start off with the finances of the movie. So according to IMDb, this movie had a budget of $20 million. So a pretty big budget for 1990.
Pretty big.
But that's still less than a third of the budget of Army of the Dead, and
But adjusted for inflation, not bad.
Yes, of course. And its box office run, it grossed worldwide $61.2 million, so it just about tripled its budget. So a financial success, and it was a critical success at the time as well, which is great. We love it when movies who deserve to be successful are actually successful. There's too many instances of fantastic movies, specifically horror movies throughout history, that just bombed because people weren't interested in seeing them. I.e., The Thing, for example, is probably your best example of an absolutely incredible movie that just didn't
almost
happen.
Any John Carpenter film, he was ahead of his time, so almost all of his shit tanked.
Yeah.
But now is revered.
100%.
You know what I mean?
Does anyone know the working title of this movie?
The only thing I know, can I get one bit of trivia? Because I only know one bit.
All right, okay.
I know who they wanted instead of Kathy Bates. And I think it would have been a totally different movie.
I've got quite a few names that were in consideration for Kathy Bates' role.
Well, the main one was Bette Midler. Could you imagine Bette Midler doing that?
Yeah, so Bette Midler was actually offered the role. So it wasn't even a case of she was considered. She was offered the role.
I didn't know she was offered it, but I knew she was the one they wanted.
She turned the role.
I think she would have done justice because she had Broadway and acting, history, but it would have been a bit more campy. You know what I mean? It would have been campy.
I think
that's what I'm meaning. Yeah, this would have been a totally different movie if it was her.
I think
she could do serious. She could do serious, but in the 90s, there was no way she was going to be doing it serious.
I think Bette Midler and Kathy Bates have relatively similar sort of theatre backgrounds as well. Kathy Bates was a very theatrical actress, in our sort of formative years. So from that aspect, I can see why, they would have been she would have been someone in consideration. For as much as I love Bette Midler and some of the things she's in, I don't think she's got the acting chops that Kathy Bates does.
Well, the difference is, and I like to insert where I spent a lot of time doing theater and directing and acting, all that. When you act on the stage is different than how you act in front of the camera. You have to pull back. You have to hold back. We're on the stage. You got to play to the back of the theater. And some people can make the transition from theater to film quite well. Bette Midler still plays every movie like she's in a theater. And Kathy Bates was able to shed that and pull back a little in a film.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't think Bette Midler does that.
No. And I think the problem now is as well with Bette Midler. Obviously, she's like you say, she's delivered great performances. She's a fine actress. She's in some great things. She can do serious. But we all now we all now just see her as well as one of the Sanderson sisters, for better or for
the main
worse,
one, yeah.
Because that's such an iconic role, and it's the role.
I'm not a Hocus Pocus fan at all.
But it's the role that's perfect for her because it allows her to give a theater performance in a movie, because that's
even in Beaches, which was big in the late 80s. That was a serious role, but she still kind of chewed the scenery. That's what she does, and that's why she's embraced.
Yeah.
But she did do some serious bits in Beaches. She did prove she could serious act as well.
Yeah, 100%.
I did like that.
I think though, I think one of you, I think Candy, you brought it up there as well about sort of the differences between acting in a theater and acting in a movie, and that obviously definitely led to some tension on set as well, because it's quite well known that there was tension on set between Kathy Bates and James Caan because of their different methods of acting. James Caan really didn't do a lot of rehearsal, if any at all, and obviously Kathy Bates, being from a big theatre background, wanted to rehearse everything really to death.
Well, you gotta have your marks in your mind. When I hit this point, this is when I pivot and I say this, and this is, when you come from a theater background, that's always in your head.
Yeah.
Where's my mark? Where do I stand? Where's the best lighting? Where do I need to be for this?
Yeah. But in a sort of backward way, it may actually have also assisted the movie, the fact that they did have this differences. Rob Reiner said that,
didn't like each other that much.
Right.
Well, he'd obviously told Bates that the frustration she's having about that, she put it towards hating Caan as a character, as Sheldon as a character, and sort of focus it into that. So it may have inadvertently actually helped the movie as well. But even though they were famously didn't really get on very well on set, they did become really good friends. They became lifelong friends after this movie had finished filming. Kathy Bates came out. Obviously James Caan, passed away in 2022.
Yeah.
Which was very sad. And she came out and said, one of her, looking back on it, filming Misery was one of her most favorite sort of filming experiences. So it is nice to know that they were lifelong friends after it as well. I kind of like
I got a factoid that I don't know if you know.
Go for it.
It does, about this movie. When Stephen King got in his car wreck, I believe it was 1999. I remember I was out of high school, or maybe 1998, because I graduated in 97. He got in that wreck that almost killed him, that he ended up writing into the Dark Tower series. Kathy Bates was kind of universally hated for a minute because she sent him like a bouquet and like a funny note that said "Got Novril," referring to the drug in this. And I thought it was clever, and Stephen King thought it was clever, but a lot of people were like, that was in poor taste. And I was like, I thought it was kind of funny.
Genius.
I know, right? And I was like, I thought it was kind of funny. I remember reading it in People's, and they had like their picks and their pans or something, and it was a pan, like a terrible thing that she did. And everybody's like, oh, how bad taste. I mean, this is early internet days, but like, I thought that was kind of clever. Brilliant. And if Stephen King thought it was clever, then it's fucking clever. It's a law now.
Yeah.
That's fucking amazing. I never knew that.
The fucking cojones on her.
Aye. Well, everyone knows she's got big balls.
Listen,
that's right.
She doesn't give a fuck.
I fucking love Kathy Bates. I think she's so
same.
She's absolutely hilarious as well. Like, she's so funny in some of the things. I know not everyone's a massive fan of the series, but her performance in American Horror Story Coven.
Yeah.
I think she's absolutely hilarious in that. And
is she the slave owner or something like that of a plantation or something?
So many,
yeah.
It's
been a while since I've seen it.
It's kind of maybe a surprising thing to say, but she's so funny in that movie. Like, again, it's another one where she's just sort of chewing the scenery. But anyways, I'm going off track again. But no, that's so funny. She's just a genuinely funny person as well. So
I used to love seeing her on stuff like Parky and interview and stuff, because I used to be well into that when I was younger. And whenever she was being interviewed, she would always come out with something fucking bad that she wasn't meant to say. And it was always brilliant.
Yeah.
Can't think of any off the top of my head, but it always used to have you in laughter,
Yeah.
That one that I just said was like, it stayed in my mind all these fucking decades. I'm like, well, yeah. I remember a funny thing.
Brilliant, like.
Stephen King has stated in interviews that Annie Wilkes is his favourite character to write due to her unexpected depth and sympathy. And I think that really comes across as well, not just in the book, but in the movie as well. That it's not Stephen King that's directing the movie, but I think you can really sort of feel that in the movie, that there's this sort of just almost love for the character, even though she's this terrible person. So I think that's interesting. Just to go back to what we were saying about people who were considered for roles, so obviously we already said that Bette Midler turned down the role of Annie Wilkes. She thought it was too violent. She later called herself stupid for turning this movie down. Fair enough, but there was a multitude of other people who were also considered for the role, including Barbara Streisand was considered for this role.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
Babs, no.
Jessica Lange.
Barbara Streisand.
Jessica Lange was also considered for this, and I'm like on the fence about whether or not I would have liked to have seen
at the time period for Jessica Lange. I don't think it would have been great. Yeah. I think as she got older, it would have been perfect. She could have done it, because I don't think anybody would have seen her in that light, because she had played ingenue roles throughout the 80s and just kind of was really not at that point in her career. And Kathy Bates could just come right in and just establish herself.
Yeah.
So I just couldn't see Jessica Lange at that time making such. I think people would have not received the movie as well, because they're like, Jessica Lange is not a bad person,
No.
Obviously, as well as with any movie, there was multiple people who were up for the role of Paul Sheldon. Jack Nicholson was offered the role, obviously well known to Stephen King fans though for his role in The Shining. He's passed in the movie stating that he didn't want to do another Stephen King book because of his experience with Stanley Kubrick on The Shining. Don't really blame him. But maybe should talk to some of his co-stars in that film, because I think they got it a little bit.
But could you imagine Jack Nicholson doing such a understated role, because he chose the scenery too?
But he
couldn't have done Paul Sheldon.
It's literally it's literally the same thing, isn't it, with the Bette Midler? Could you imagine this being Bette
Midler
and Jack
same
Nicholson?
Thing.
Like, it would just be so jarring. But I think you need to speak to Shelley.
But saying that, they do work together well, because they have worked together before, Bates and Jack Nicholson. So they could have.
Yeah, no,
I'm not saying it would have been better, but I reckon it would have been good.
Film, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's a different film.
Yeah.
I think it would have been half decent.
Well, I mean, given some of the other names that were connected to the role, you could have had Dustin Hoffman, who was considered for the role. Yeah,
I would have loved that.
I don't know.
Would you? I wouldn't.
I love Hoffman.
You could have had Ed O'Neill.
Al Bundy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, nobody would have taken that seriously because Married with Children was huge at the time. Nobody would take that seriously, including me. I would have been like, "What is he going to sell me shoes?" Or
I'd be like, "Why is this not funny?"
Yeah,
or you could have been
weird.
You could have had Bill Murray.
Absolutely not.
See, definitely not in the 90s. Like Bill Murray can do serious, but not then.
That's just.
I don't know that I could see him in a Paul Sheldon role. You need somebody who can scale back, and I don't know.
I think, listen, ultimately, at the end of the day, the casting for this movie is just they got it.
Oh no, the casting was good. Like,
just a couple other pieces for me in terms of trivia. Obviously, I've already mentioned about Kathy Bates winning an Oscar. She was the first woman to win an Oscar for Best Actress in a horror or thriller due to this movie. And even since then, there's not been that many since. I think
it's like what Jodie Foster for Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah,
a couple. It was like what, a year or two later.
Didn't Natalie Portman win for Black Swan?
Yeah, that was much later.
Yeah, that was much later. But I think those are the only two off the top of my head that I can.
Yeah,
think of,
those are the ones I can think of.
Since then. So. Quite the achievement, but I think that speaks more about the Oscars than it does about performances in horror, because
it does.
There's been a lot of performances out there that have been criminally overlooked by the Academy. So
Toni Collette from Hereditary is probably the biggest one for me.
Yeah,
it's the one that he always says.
It's the one I always say. Yeah, absolutely.
I 100% agree with that because she was phenomenal. I think she's phenomenal in everything she does. She's a great actress. Yeah. She can do anything, but that was a fucking Oscar role.
She can do funny, she can do serious, she can do horror. She is really, really talented.
Yeah.
I forgot to finish it earlier. So the working title of this movie was How Do You Do? And it just sort of reminds me of like Ned Flanders.
How do you doodly do?
Yeah, that's exactly the thought that came into my head.
It was Dudley Do Right that it fucking reminded me of.
Last piece of trivia that I've got: James Caan once showed up to the set so hungover that none of the footage that was filmed that day could be used. Reiner lied to him, don't know why, and told him that it was due to a problem at the filming lab. But Caan found out the real reason, and because he's a bit of a class act, he did cover the money that the studio lost that day. So.
I was to say that's a lot of money you wasted there, buddy.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, but don't show up to your work hungover when you're an actor.
I was a way to say you definitely can't say that.
I'm not an actor.
I was a way to say, but when I heard you say don't show up to your work hungover, I was a way to go, you liar.
I'm not an actor. I've shown up to my work hungover many times in my career. But...
Obviously, I've never done it.
Yeah.
As a mom, I would have been fired. I haven't held a job since 2006. I've been raising my kids, so I would have been fired, and that's not something I want to be fired from.
Yeah.
See, as an electrician in that job, I've never ever done it in the electrician job. Honest, but the DJing job. You just carry on drinking. You're not fucking hungover, are you?
Getting the buzz going.
I was starting to feel pretty fucking rough last night. Anyway, that's all I've got for trivia. Obviously, there was a lot more trivia there than there was in our last episode to get into. It's a much more interesting movie to talk about. Any other tidbits from you guys before we move on?
No,
I think I'm good.
Awesome. Right, let's move on then to our final segment, and we'll do the ratings and the reviews. And as always, we start off with the critic scores. IMDb gave this movie a 7.8 out of 10. Metacritic giving it a 7.5. We'll play the game again. What do you guys think the Rotten Tomatoes critics scored this movie? Nico, we'll let you go first with this one.
I'm trying to remember back then if critics were high on it. I'm pretty sure they were.
Well, that's what I'm asking you.
I'm trying to work it out though. I'll say 75.
75. Candy?
I'm going to go more towards like 80, 82, something like that.
Well, you went the right way this time. I think you lost both of them in the last
Yay!
episode. The Rotten Tomatoes critics scored this 91%.
Fuck yeah.
Really,
They're usually not that nice.
Yeah, really.
I was thinking up myself. That's why I went 70 odd. Because I was thinking 80 odd, and I'm like, it'll never get above that. Not back then.
No, 91%.
So yeah.
The critics' consensus elevated by standout performances from James Caan and Kathy Bates. This taut and frightening film is one of the best Stephen King adaptations to date. So they're really high on it. Flip it now to the audience. Candy, we'll let you go first on this. Rotten Tomatoes audience, what do you think they scored this?
I would say I'm going to stick with my same one, maybe 80.
80. Okay, Nico?
I was going to say 80, so I'll add my lucky number, 82.
82. Nico, you went the right way with this one. Rotten Tomatoes audience scoring this 90% fresh, so there's just one point difference between the two.
You're underestimating this one.
So
I know, because I did not think it would be that high on both.
So both critics. And
that doesn't happen very often.
Really,
nice.
Really high on this movie. There's no audience consensus on Rotten Tomatoes, but yeah, so really, really high scores there. As always, with all of the movies that we cover, we throw it out to our followers and listeners, asking for your scores and opinions. Here is just a few of them. We'll kick off with Wren, friend of the show, former guest on the show. He always has nice, interesting things to say about the movies that we cover.
His reviews are great.
Yeah, it's no secret that it's rare that filmmakers are able to accurately translate King's written work to film. But Misery was one of those rare exceptions back in the day. A few subtle changes that doesn't take away from the excellent pressure cooker of tension. Bates is completely unhinged in arguably her finest performance. And who doesn't like a good hobbling? 8 out of 10. So
that's a pretty good review.
Yeah. Newman, also former guest on the show, regular contributor to the show from Movies for Days podcast, also gives it an 8 out of 10. A grand exercise in tension building in a small, localized setting with two titan actors going toe-to-toe. Easily one of the best Stephen King adaptations. A great winter watch. I think we can all see the sort of theme that's coming through here and the level that people are on. Sarah Marie on Twitter gives it a 10 out of 10. Absolutely brilliant acting, the setting, everything falls into place for this classic movie. Biohazard Drew gives it solid 10, perfect movie, very tense and frustrating watching Paul fail to escape so many times until the final fuck yeah moment with the typewriter bonk. Bet it was great to see at the cinema. And finally, Francis Lalonde on Facebook also gives it a 9. I'm hesitant to give it a 10, but for no reason I can single out, I guess I'm not its number one fan. I'd put off watching this for way too long, and at first I wasn't sure I'd be able to get into it. My apprehension was unfounded. Such a great film. So there we are. Obviously, thank you to everyone who gives us your scores and opinions. We can't read them all out. We simply don't have the time to, but there was quite a few others in there as well. On average, all of our listeners gave this movie a 9 out of 10, which is super fucking high. A really great score.
That's amazing.
I think it's possibly like the 5th or 6th highest score that's ever been given out by the audience on the show. And
impressive.
The only movies that are above it that I'm just trying to sort of quickly. There's 5 movies that have gotten a higher score from our listeners, and it's The Thing, Halloween, Jaws, Alien, and Aliens. So it's right up there.
You're fighting titans, basically.
Titans, right up there. That's literally our top 5 movies. That's the only thing they've scored it higher, and even then, this is pretty fucking close to a couple of them. But excuse me. That just leaves the two of us. Candy, we'll let you go first this time. On a scale of 0 to 10, did I say the two of us? I'm still in my old habits. That just leaves the 3 of us.
I've been replaced. I'll see you later.
Nico,
I've been replaced. It's fine.
Nico, I've been trying to replace you from day one. This is just the beginning.
Fuck you.
And you chose me.
You're never getting rid of me, you cunt.
Wow. That just leaves the 3 of us. So, Candy, on a scale of 0 to 10, what would you rate Misery?
This was a tough one for me. I want to give it 10 out of 10. I desperately do. But I just wish there was a little bit more. Like, give me 25 minutes more, 30 minutes more of just more that we could have done. And I think, a couple years later they would have absolutely done that, but at the time, no, you just didn't make movies that long. So that makes me have to give it like a 9.5. It's so close to being perfect. It's so well done, and it's definitely my favorite adaptation of King's work. And I am so stingy with that shit. A lot of people would say like the mist has some problems that this movie doesn't have. Obviously I'm gonna do the usual, yeah, the book's better. It is, because books are cool. um but I love movies too, so I think given the material, they did what they could do with it, all that you could do with it. Just a little bit more, like I want to give it perfect, I really really do, but I can't. So 9.5. Everybody's great in it. James Caan surprised me. Even at the time I was just thinking of The Godfather, and I'm like, oh wow, okay, this is different. um but yeah, it's so fucking good. It's just really good. And I did not need to rewatch this movie for this, but I did anyway because I own it, and why the fuck not? It's so good. So yeah, 9.5 out of 10 for me.
Awesome. Nico, out of 0 to 10, what are you giving Misery?
Well, I saw the movie before the book, and that's the reason I'm giving it a 10. But I do agree with Candy's points.
Wow, I didn't think you were going to
I would have liked more in it, but as I said, I saw the movie first before the book, and it was one of the only ones that I did do it that way. And genuinely, I thought it was just so good. Everything in it, they do less is more in the right places. They've got the right cast, as you said. Everything is just perfect. The score, who would have thought that the score would have been that good for it?
Yeah. Wow, I genuinely didn't think you were going to give this a 10. I knew obviously you were going to be high on it. That's only the 4th 10 you've ever given out on the show. On the 5th, sorry.
Wow.
Yeah,
it's the 5th 10 you've ever given out.
Now
I'm
feeling stingy over here.
It is genuinely probably, like, I hate to say it, but it's probably the best Stephen King movie.
I agree.
Fair. Okay.
Like, rewatching it, it's went to number 1 spot. You know what I mean?
So, here I come, the stingy one.
No.
I think
this has got to be like an 8.
I'm gonna give this a 0. No, I'm joking.
Oh no.
I think this is
8.5.
I think this is the greatest Stephen King adaptation. I think it's possibly the one that sticks the closest to this, like, it sticks so close to the source material, but changes just enough to make it not only just like its own thing as well, but it gets that balance so right. Because we spoke about it in the episode. It's so easy to get that balance wrong and put something from a book into a film that's just not possible. It doesn't translate. We've talked about that. The casting's great, the score's great, everything is great. The only reason I'm not giving this a 10 out of 10 is because I just simply have other movies that I prefer. And this is like elite. We're talking like the elite levels of movies here. We are talking the titans of movies.
I was sweating going back and forth myself.
I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. So I'm being the stingy one, but like it's super minor. It's super minor. I don't give 10s out of 10s on this podcast, though. Everyone knows that. Even my favorite movies of all time.
Even when he shoots, he doesn't
even
do it.
to Nico's, chagrin, I don't give out 10s out of 10s on this show. So I'm gonna give it.
Even when I've heard him say he would give a movie a 10, he's never given the movie a 10.
It's weird that I started out the show on these 2 episodes because I'm usually the most generous rater on anything ever, and I've learned after all these years I can't give everything 10s just because I feel bad for it or something.
Exactly. Nico.
I don't give it out. Like, I genuinely think this is the best Stephen King adaptation after rewatch. It was gonna. If I hadn't rewatched it, it would have been a 9. But now I've rewatched it, it's been bumped up to a 10. Because it hasn't aged or anything. It's perfect.
I think had this been like the 20th 10 you'd given out on the podcast at this, point in our history, then yeah, I would maybe be like, oh yeah, you give everything 10s. It is only the 5th you've given out, and again, the other ones you've given out are for Aliens, they're for The Thing, they're for The Omen, and they're for The Lost Spot. So like, it's a rare thing for you to give out. So I will let you have that. But You guys were guessing what 15th to 20th for this movie. So all of our scores combined with
Because I thought the critics would have been so low.
Yeah, all of our scores combined with the listeners and the critic scores gives Misery an average score of 8.9 out of 10, and it means it is in 5th place on our leaderboard.
Sweet.
Nice.
5th place. It is one place.
I was expecting more naysayers somewhere along the line, I guess.
No.
I genuinely thought it would be critics and audience. Because I know people who've said, oh, it's not that good. It's all right.
No,
and then there's a hell of a lot of people that'll just go, the book's so much better. And I'm like, that's what put me off it.
I do think the book's better, but it doesn't detract from the film.
But
yeah,
no,
same.
it's just, we're talking.
But the only difference with your one was I saw the movie first. That's the only reason that I can't say that it should have that in it because I saw this first.
We've talked about
well, it was only my second Stephen King book. The first was Pet Sematary, which scared the absolute shit out of me. And then Misery, my mom got it when it came out in hardback with that iconic cover with just him and get the windows. He's in the wheelchair, kind of slumped over a little bit. What a great simplistic cover. But it was only the second book I'd ever read by Stephen King. So it does have a place close to my heart.
But we've also talked about that before with other movies, that it really does make a difference if, you have a novel adaptation, whether or not you've read the novel first or seen the movie first. That really does matter for some people and their perspective on things. So
it does to me because I'm a book nerd, but I also do know that not everything can translate, considering that the majority of the things that happen in Misery, it's all from Paul's perspective and a lot is in his mind. You can't put that in a movie.
Yeah. I think what I love about this and the ratings and how it sort of ended up is, when I mentioned the movies that the audience had rated higher in this, and quite rightfully so, we were like, those are like the titans of horror. Those are your big hitters. And for me,
like the gimmies, basically.
One thing for me is about Misery, for as much as we love it, I always feel like it's somehow undervalued as a horror movie. I never, like, when people are talking about the great horror movies, Misery is rarely brought up as like the example of one of the greatest horror movies. And so,
but do you know why I think that is? I have a theory. I think that to your average horror view, and I'm just talking like just an average person, maybe doesn't do it, watch horror movies like we do. When they sit down for a horror movie, it's like a thrill ride, like a roller coaster or something. And this just doesn't have that roller coaster feel to it. It doesn't have a lot of gore. It doesn't have a lot of action. It's a very subtle movie, and some people that doesn't read for them.
Yeah,
that's my thing.
But I'm really happy that it's ended up in the place that it's ended up, and it's beaten out some massive titans there. Just for sort of completionist sake, because it's obviously landed in 5th place, it's now knocked the original Nightmare on Elm Street out of our top 10. So Nightmare on Elm Street's now dropped down to 11th, 11th place. So yeah, but that's how good this movie is, and yeah, maybe for one or two of those movies in that top 10, people will say that doesn't deserve to be there. But, by and large, now when you look at that sort of, I would say top 8 that we've got: Aliens, Alien, Jaws, Halloween, Misery, The Thing, Reanimator, and The Omen. You for a lot, those are like interchangeable for so many people. For some people, we've got The Omen in 8th, that could easily be their number 1, or Reanimator, The Thing. That's where you're at, where it's such fine margins. And but yeah, I think 5th. I have absolutely, sometimes when we rate a movie, I think the good thing about the way we do things is that we generally tend to get the true area of where a movie should go because of the way we rate them. Obviously, there's exceptions to that rule, and there's room in there for personal preference.
Don't agree with Halloween 3.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying though. There's room in there for like personal preference as well, to like
personal, really, Reanimator absolutely deserves it.
I genuinely think Misery is that good a movie that it deserves its spot. Listen, is it going to stay there? Probably not, because there's some massive movies that we've covered that we haven't reviewed that will probably go above it. But, for right now, 5th place, given all the movies we've done, I'm perfectly happy with that being there.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm shocked at that. But shocked in a good way, like. Yeah,
it's pleasantly surprised, and it's there's not much room in this world for pleasant
like, hey,
surprises.
Misery, we're gonna give you your flowers today because we appreciate you.
Yeah. So yeah, that was Misery. A great movie, and luckily loved by us, loved by the listeners, loved by the critics. Yeah, well, there's not really much more that we can say. And I still managed to be the stingiest out of the three of us. So, we're
I think you should go first from now on, so you can't undercut us.
I can't do that, Nico. I'm sorry.
Because I'm sure that's what you actually do. You wait to see what we're going. If we're talking about it, you always seem to just go like half a point or a point below sometimes.
That's what happens when you host the podcast, Nico.
Well, on the other side of the spectrum, my old show, I was the host, and I always went first because I was like,
you always were like, get my opinion out there first.
I was always like, it's time for my opinion, and you're gonna have to listen to it, and I don't give a fuck what the rest of you rate it. That's just me.
Good. That's the best way to do it.
I'm very opinionated.
Well, that's fine. You two, therefore, can continue to be the first ones to give out your ratings. I'm more than happy to sit back and listen to what you two have to say about the movies. But yeah, so...
And then deduct a point from what we say.
Listen, Nico, there have been plenty... I might be the stingier of the two of us, but there have been plenty of times where I've rated movies higher than you. Plenty of times.
I think you should write down your score now and just show it at the end so we know you're not cheating.
Fib.
Aye. 3.
Like fucking Strictly.
One of them's just blank. This was that shit. It's nothing.
It's like it'll be like Strictly Come Dancing with a paddle board coming out and being like 7.
7. I like Lloyd.
Oh, anyways, that is gonna do it for this episode. I'm not going to tell you what we're covering next week because once we go off air, we're going to discuss what we're going to do next week. So stay close to our social media platforms, and you'll get the announcements of what's going to be coming up on the show in the next couple of weeks. That's X at Damn Podcast, Facebook and Instagram at Pod of the Damned. You can email us at podofthedamned@gmail.com, and you can subscribe to us on Patreon, patreon.com/Pod of the Damned. Don't forget, on our Patreon, you get early access to all the video recordings of this episode. We've been saying it for a few weeks now. We are looking to start up new side series for the podcast, including non-horror reviews. We are looking to bringing back old side series to the main show, including our top 5s as well. We still have the bucket list horror side series that we started last summer that we maybe will be bringing back this summer as well. So there's still lots and lots going on the show as well. But you've got that on Patreon too. So it's just £1 to sign up from there. Patreon.com/Pod of the Damned. Yeah, I think that's it. Guys, thank you very much once again for joining me.
Thanks for having me on again.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And thank you to everyone for downloading and listening to this episode as well at home, and for everyone who interacts with us across our social media. And until next week on the Pod of the Damned, just remember, you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.